All right, I think we can get started. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining this Ask the Author session hosted by Table in partnership with SIANI. I'm Matthew Kessler, host and producer of Feed, the Food Systems podcast, and project coordinator at Table. I'll be introducing and moderating this session today. And to allow more time for discussion, I'll try to keep my intro brief. So, at the center of this event is the question, how does food system transformation actually happen? Food system transformation is a phrase that seems to be on everyone's lips lately. It was highlighted at the UN Food Systems Summit in 2021 and has been a rallying cry by grassroots actors and civil society organizations for decades. But what is food system transformation exactly, and how does it happen? One of my podcast guests described food system transformation as an incomplete sentence. Transform to what? So to provide some insight here, we're joined by two members from SIANI, the Swedish International Agricultural Initiative. SIANI is a branch of the Stockholm Environment Institute and has been building a network and working on the ground with organizations for over 15 years now, trying to answer this question. We've asked everyone joining the session to read SIANI's latest program document in advance. The aim here is to explore an article or report, and we can ask the authors of the document how they think about their theory of change and how they measure the impact of their work. This has been an evolving process, and I'm looking forward to learning how SIANI has developed their thinking over time. That's basically how these Ask the Author sessions work. We take a deep dive look into a recent publication and have a discussion with the authors. We invite some panelists to join, and others volunteer themselves because of their relevant professional experience and research interests. A big thank you to all the panelists and to all of you for joining us. In a second, I'll hand over to the authors, but first, some quick housekeeping. Please be aware that this session is being recorded and we may share it later on our website. For the panelists, if you'd like to speak, please raise your virtual hand. And besides asking questions, you're also welcome to respond to what everyone else says. We can do our best to imagine we're all sitting around a table and having a conversation, but in this awkward digital space. Please be aware that our time here is short and we'd like to include as many voices as possible. So I will cut you off by waving this baby bunny cloth here if you're getting too passionate about the topic. Lastly, I want to highlight that the Zoom Q&A section is open for questions and comments. We encourage everyone to use it to both ask questions and also to respond to them. As I mentioned, we ask you all to read SIANI's program document in advance. Alice Thunfjord and Madeleine Fogde will give a short presentation now, and then we'll open up the floor for a discussion. You can read more about their bios in the chat. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew, for this introduction, and thank you all for joining us and for wanting to read our documents and also to be here to discuss it. It's a great honor for us, of course. And I will do a start already back in 2003 when Sweden in the parliament had an interparliamentarian decision to make the policy for global development. And in that policy of global development, it was meant that all actors should work towards the same aim and goal, to avoid doing harm, to work in coherence and enhance collaboration. And this was then channelized out to different initiatives. And one of them was the Swedish International Agriculture Network Initiative. And this was actually a very interesting process because it was a consultation with 400 experts from civil society, from governments, from academia, all coming together to see what they wanted. So they wanted a network, and they wanted the kind of activities that we are still doing today. And Alice will come to them later when she presents the current version of the document. However, finding the aim and how we should profile us was not so easy. So in the inception, it was the aim and the focus was more on effective development cooperation for poverty reduction and through sustainable agriculture production. And production was really key. We are back in 2007 when we have a food crisis, and it was really the focus of everyone. However, with time, as you see the period, it changed, the kind of network changed from different management. And it was still focusing on the development part. And it was kind of expected that this little network then would have an impact on decision made in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or at SIDA as a result, as an indicator, how it was then, how the aim was formalized. And by the end of this phase, this was found impossible because we were a very small network doing some activities per year and couldn't possibly influence. But we had come together and we have already started our journey. So the next phase, Alice, is then from 2013. And then we are already understanding that poverty alleviation is more than production. You need to look at the food and nutrition at all. And then we also needed to actually trying to define what are we doing. So we are promoting dialogue among these different actors. We are doing this in the context of poverty reduction and primarily in low-income countries. However, you see the vision is an impossible. We can contribute, but we can never really understand if we are even close because it's too big. It's a very high level. So, but anyhow, we worked and we had some results, and we, as I said, the development pushed us, and we pushed also the network into the growing policy development in the world. And you can also see, so 2016, we are already back with a new period. And this time it's really looking at aligning itself with Agenda 2030. So you will see that our goal is the same as Agenda 2030. However, we still emphasize on knowledge exchange and dialogue. And we did very successfully. I think it was a period of COVID. But when we come to the kind of evaluation, they say, hey, you guys, why can't we find anything about network in your kind of goal statements and work? Because that's the thing you actually are doing. So we kind of lost it the whole way. So this was a little bit to introduce to you why we have the current theory of change and the thinking behind it, because it has been a long process. However, these are also results of, what should I say, current or frequent evaluations. And through those evaluations, what has been clear and every time is that SIANI is very relevant for the actors. And that is why we are still existing, because we have this coming out from all periods, independently how we have phrased ourselves. But we are addressing issues, and the actors, they are varied, and they are still finding their participation and enjoying the network as relevant for them. So with this, I would like then Alice, who really did a big job on the current theory of change, which we did together, of course, in different consultation. But it's now you that will present the document. Alice.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Madeleine. Yes, as you said, this history of SIANI and the learnings from our previous phases led us to our current phase, which started in 2023. And we started developing our new program document, which we have shared with you, and our theory of change in 2021, 2022. And it was highly participatory with our team in the Secretariat, but also our steering committee. And through that process, we came up with a new vision and mission statement, which reads that SIANI supports and promotes multi-sector dialogue and action around food systems transformation in Sweden and globally, with participation from academia, the private sector, public authorities, international organizations, and civil society for a future where food systems are more sustainable, rights-based, and inclusive of smallholder farmers and marginalized groups. And there are some key elements here that I would like to raise that are based on learnings from previous phases. As Madeleine said, previous evaluations have highlighted the need to actually visualize the role of the network and how we are situated in Sweden, but also connect to actors globally. And our new mission also highlights that we do dialogue and action and who we work with, which sectors that we actually engage with in this work. But the mission and vision statement also situate ourselves and our network in the broader context of food system transformation as well. And from this mission and vision statement, we have been working a lot to develop our new theory of change. And for those of you who have read our program document, you've seen this in a nicer version, but I figured I'd show you a simplified one today, just for the sake of discussion. When we developed this theory of change, we started with what we wanted to change. And an important part of developing this has been to define what our sphere of control is versus our sphere of influence. So first we decided to come up with our impact statement, which you can see in the green box on the screen. It's still quite broad. It's the same as the vision statement that I just read. But for this time, to define the scope and define what SIANI can actually influence in this big, ambitious goal of food systems transformation, we defined 3 sub-impact statements, which you can see below the green box on the screen, where we define which groups and rights holders that SIANI's scope should include or can include. So we have chosen to focus on the recognition of rural youth, the recognition of smallholder farmers and small and medium-sized enterprises, and the recognition of forest communities, indigenous people, and natural resource dependent poor. And I think the word recognition was something that we debated a lot, and we tried to find the correct word, which also aligns to our work and our sphere of control as what we can do as a network and communication platform. In the theory of change, it was also important for us to recognize the vibrant network of over 5,000 members, partners, and actors that we have established since 2008. Those were critical inputs and enablers in our theory of change. So we kind of had the impact statement and the inputs and enablers and tried to fill in the gap in between. So how do we go from this vibrant established network to our impact and sub-impact? And here we also learned from our previous phases and really went back to what is the role of us as a network in food systems transformation. So which activities and outputs have we achieved in the past? What have we learned from them? And have they been realistic? And what outcomes can we connect to our activities and outputs as a network? And how do they relate to our impact? So we decided to formulate 4 activity and output categories and 4 outcome areas, which you see in the black and the orange boxes. And in our everyday work as a network, we work mostly in the black boxes. Those are the things that we can control, the activities and the outputs that we produce. And in the longer term, to evaluate and monitor our contribution over a year or more, we focus on outcomes in the orange boxes. And it's also important to highlight in our theory of change that we haven't defined any specific pathways or arrows or lines that you might see in other theory of changes, but instead see that the work that we do in all of the activity and output categories can in some way contribute and make a change in 1, 2, 3, or 4 outcome areas. So by developing this, we really learned from our previous phases that Madeleine presented to know that our work must be realistic, what we can control, but also helping us know how to stretch our boundaries and our comfort zones in making a contribution to food system transformation. And it also helps us focus more on what we can control, what we can influence, and be more realistic in that work to make the most possible impact as one actor among many in food systems transformation, knowing that we are not the only one. And I have one last slide before we move into discussions, and I'm very eager to hear your thoughts and experiences in your organizations as well. But I wanted to show you some impacts, because that's kind of the theme of this dialogue as well. Like, how do we make real impact and food systems transformation? And as many of you may know or have experience with, measuring and monitoring impact might be very difficult. It can take time, or it does take time, often many years. But here, even when we monitor and look and record our impact as a network, the role of the network platform has been very useful, because as a network, we connect with people not only through our activities, but over a long time, engaging them again and again, building up stronger partnerships. And I think this has helped us also to know which contribution we can make towards our impact statement. For example, we have had long-term engagement with young people over time, connecting to young entrepreneurs, for example, again and again in different activities. And in one case, this has led to one young entrepreneur gaining potential access to land and credit facilities in his country, which will also follow up if this actually happen, but we have an indication of that. And we have also, through our network, become a very established platform for facilitating and strengthening the work of the Swedish resource base in sustainable agriculture, food security, and nutrition. And in the midterm review of our third phase in 2018, it said that SIANI has lifted Sweden's ability to play a role in addressing policy issues related to the achievement of SDG 2. And the last little box is our one example of a third impact, which highlights that as a network, activities and impact can continue and sustain themselves. In our program document, we describe our work with expert groups, which are regional groups and projects which SIANI finances over 1 to 2 years to amplify work and connect them to our network. And one of these groups, the Mekong Expert Group, was established around 2015-16, I believe. And they were a group of actors in Southeast Asia, Sweden, and Africa, working on agroforestry for nutrition and food security. And after the collaboration and funding with SIANI ended, they continued to work as a group and contribute to the ASEAN guidelines for agroforestry development in 2018, and have since then also continued their engagement to support activities and products related to the guidelines, showing that the network can actually sustain itself in many ways too, highlighting the important role of building those strong connections. Yeah, that was it for me.
Great.
Matthew.
Great. Thank you, Alice, and thank you, Madeline. Yeah, you could stop sharing your screen, and we can also bring all the panelists on the screen as well now. So we've got about 40 minutes or so for discussion. That's when we will officially end the recording, and then we can stay on the call if we'd like to kind of informally chat a little bit longer. You know, one of the goals is to kind of share experiences here, but also to sort of network and get to know each other a little bit better. And I see on the call a lot of people who are, you know, deeply involved in food system transformation, you know, from a very practical level, from a research level, but also from a kind of program strategic coordination perspective. So I think we can nerd out, you know, on the methodological details of developing a theory of change. I've been a part of that conversation at that table, so it's interesting to kind of see how you've thought about that. The floor is now open for questions. Panelists, you're welcome to kind of raise your virtual hand, and I can call on you, and then I'll ask you if you could just introduce yourself, and then also, yeah, just because to be aware that we have a lot of people who'd like to kind of share your questions and insights. We'll try to keep it short. And yeah, and I guess I just one question I have a bunch of questions, but I want to open the floor. So I'll just say one quick one, and then I'll open up the floor to the panelists, which is, I find it really interesting how you are a network and you engage this kind of wide ecosystem of actors in the food system, and each of them, plays a role in this food system transformation. And you also kind of have different responsibilities, and you could be kind of hold each other accountable in different ways. So I was just wondering how you think about like what are the responsibilities of your work or other actors in food system transformation? Where does your work end and where does other work begin? And that could be to either of you.
Is that a question to us?
Yes.
Okay, good. Should I, Alice, do you want to start, or
No,
we
you can-
didn't really?
You
What?
can, you can go.
Okay, so what we have been doing, Matthew, is that we have tried to erase issues that sometimes has not been raised before, sometimes it has, but we do it in a way where we invite speakers from the different sectors or constituencies that we have to kind of orient ourselves about the problem. What is happening? Is Sweden doing anything at all? Sometimes they are not. That was a long time back when we did social securities, for example, and discussed and whatever. And so our role has been kind of raising the topic and then handing over it to the actors, and possibly their kind of also facilitate networking or collaboration somehow. Or also, if we think that this is a topic that needs more encouragement and understanding, we have also kind of formulate our expert group calls to enable people maybe to get together, create these multi-stakeholder groups and work a little bit more on the depth. But our funding is minimal, but still it has emanated into research papers or publications or different things, policy briefs, which has continued later on. But our role is very small. We are not implementing, but we are facilitating, we are enabling these meeting possibilities and also the platform. Over to Alice. If whatever I forgot, you will complement.
No, I agree. And I think that's also visible in our new theory of change in our program document, that amplification is actually part of our outcome areas, and that things can happen even after our activities and our role kind of ends and other actors taking over. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. So we've got Sid and then Anna and then Anna. And if you could just introduce yourself, and also if you have a question that's similar to what someone said, just raise your hand so you can kind of tag it on to the back of it. So Sid, you first, please.
Thank you, Matthew, and hello, everyone. My name is Sid Mehta. I'm the Senior Director at Simon Fraser University, looking and leading our services group, which includes food. We serve around 15,000 meals a day. And with that comes a lot of responsibility in supporting not just SFU, but all our region, city and subnational governments. My question is it's a twofold question. One is typically an initiative like this that needs a starting point. And I was wondering where and which group had the vision to do this in terms of leadership and the push, because to make some system changes, you need kind of that constant constant enabler to enable these shifts. And the second part of the question is around food systems require multiple ministries to work together, whether it's health, whether it's trade, or whether it's climate. And I was wondering how you are accomplishing kind of this, multi-sectorial, multi-ministerial engagement that leads to actions. Thank you very much.
Okay, yeah. So I think the initial push was actually a desire from the government to have in line with a global policy for development that still is in force somehow. It was established 2003 by a united parliament. It means that it doesn't go away in different elections. And then we have had fortunate funding from SIDA, which is a Swedish International Development Agency. And of course, also a lot of support, which we have leveraged from all the members who participate, usually without, or, you know, on their own, with their own contributions. And we support some, but many come and contribute by their, because their understanding of that this platform is important for them for some reasons or the other. So I think that we should be thankful for that parliament that had this foresight and enabled this creation, because then the consultation was among researchers and everyone, and they defined the network, the task, and how they would like to see it forward. And SIDA enabled us to get started and has continued with a very generous support. Now, for working with the government, I think this is because the government is also part of the network, and it depends a little bit on what kind of questions and issues you have. So we have been invited different representatives from different parts of the government, and we were together with the government. We were actually a key actor for the realization of the Swedish food system dialogues, which was a huge one, which was national, where a lot of ministries participated, and the kind of pathway which was defined to 2021 has tasks for each government. And after this kind of food system dialogues, there has been a work in the government to unite all the government agencies and ministries to have the same definition on food system, so that they can collaborate better together. So there was some kind of results from the food system dialogues. I mean, SIANI cannot influence the government, but we can collaborate and we can support and facilitate for them to finding good speakers or finding good topics, or discuss topics at least, or whatever. We are not that important at all, but we can kind of convene activities, and we also convene when we work with, let's say, social securities. We have to have the Ministry of Social Welfare with us, and we have to have the Ministry of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and Ministry also for Enterprise and Innovation, or Rural Affairs. This ministry change names every election, so it depends on who is in the room. Anyhow, so that is a kind of collaboration, and we're fortunate. We are fortunate because we have had these good dialogues in the government also.
And also fortunate that the government is supporting such initiative.
Yeah,
where not all
so.
national governments are supporting such things. And maybe a follow-up question for later is, how do you get this on the agenda if your government doesn't support that? But let's go to some other questions. So we have Ana Perez.
Yes, thank you. So thank you for the presentation, super interesting. I have a practical question, introduction first. Anna from Inclusive Business Partners. We are a non-for-profit organization supporting mostly entrepreneurs, private sector actors actually, to work in emerging markets to meet global development needs, and agri and food is one of the sectors we work quite a lot. We are a member of SIANI, so if there is something I don't agree about what you said, Madeleine and Alice, is that your contribution is small. It is not, it's huge. Thanks to your support, we have found amazing partners in emerging markets, and we keep working with them. So you might just maybe consider the opening the door or the connection as small, but it's actually huge for us. So thank you for that. And my practical question is about SMEs that you mentioned in the document quite a lot, and that you want to see tangible outcomes of the work you do. But I was wondering which type of outcomes, at outcome level, what type of outcomes you see could happen for SMEs, and if already you have thought about how to measure that, your relation with SMEs, especially.
Yeah, it's a very good question, Anna. And we are this year, we started up the phase last year with very much recognizing the small SMEs, because their role is pivotal in facilitating market access, in processing, and those kind of activities. So first of all, we try to invite them and make sure that we also have activities that could be attractive for them and reaching out in different ways. I think we have quite a few SMEs followers. There are many of them, maybe only they are very micro, but they are also growing. And you, with your inclusive business, has also helped us a lot in that field and convinced us how important it is. Now, this year, we will look more at financing and how to do that. So we will have some kind of finance seminar, because it's still a very tricky issue to get finance down to the SMEs, and even worse, to the smallholders. So we are working on that. We have a good collaboration established with IFAD, which is a bank from the UN. And I think we are kind of learning a lot with them, and also sharing what they are doing, and making that they exist and that they are present, and they are actually supporting those smallholders. So those are the kind of connections we are doing and have been doing for a long time, actually. But we haven't really gotten so far yet. But last year in Nairobi, and I think that's thanks to you, we had quite a good participation in a meeting which we called annual regional meeting of smallholder and SMEs. So they were obviously interested.
Alice, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I also wanted to add on your practical question on indicators in particular, Anna. And coming back to what I said before on the keyword of recognition, right? Because the role of SIANI is really, as you said, Madeleine, to open up doors and recognize the importance of of these right holder groups that we have defined in our program document. And I think that can be, so we haven't developed specific indicators for each group, but rather indicators for our outcome areas. So are the recognition of these groups that we deem important for food system transformation, are they visible in agendas, in policy documents, in topics that are discussed for food systems transformation? Do people, partners and intermediate actors in Sweden and globally actually have the capacity and knowledge of the importance of these groups? And are there any joint action happening through our expert groups or in our network to recognize these groups further? And of course, in our last outcome area says, also including these groups in our network. As you said, Madeleine, as well, this is something that we are working on and contributing in that way. So it's more overall indicators towards all groups. But it would be interesting to dig deeper into how to work with those groups more specifically, and where outcomes and indicators might actually differ between them. I think that could be something we take forward into our upcoming work.
I see other people nodding along too. So if there are things that you want to kind of comment on or, call back, feel free to. So just to continue in order of the hands that were raised, we've got Anna Rickert, and then Willis, and then Emily, and then Sahar.
Wow. Okay, so thank you. My name is Anna Rickert, and I work at WWF Sweden as a food expert. And I want to do some love bombing here because I've been following the work of SIANI since it started. And I think I was actually in one of the applications for expert group in the very beginning. And it's been so interesting to see how you have matured and developed your work. And I think you gave a good presentation, Madeleine, but I really want to stress that this has been a learning process and a very good maturing of this small organization that does very good things with small money. One of the things that you do that is wonderful is that you all the professionals that are young people that enter into SIANI to work in SIANI exit SIANI and work in important places in society. So it's I mean, that's a small contribution to the global world, but well done to have that as a strategy. And I mean, that's one thing. But I also wanted to say, because my contribution here would be on the business side. I have a contribution on the youth side too, but I'll go for the business right now, because you said, Madeleine, you were working on financing and meeting IFAD. I've been thinking a bit about this, how to get funding to and how to reward practices, sustainability practices on the ground among small and medium-sized entrepreneurs, companies, agricultural producers. And I mean, getting a business model understanding is also something. I mean, we have to think about public financing, private financing, and going into what kind of a business model do we need? I was looking, for example, the other day at Rainforest Alliance certification, sharing a burden in the supply chain to ensure that the company putting the label on the product also contributes to all the way down to the farmer. And I think more work like that is needed, and that could be something to take on. I looked specifically in your theory of change document at the business side, and I think it could be developed. There could be some thinking there to further this, because I agree with you, Madeleine, that this is pivotal, getting funding to things happening on the ground. I don't have answers, but I think we could work to find them.
No, definitely. And I think it's something you find together. Alice, do you want to respond, or? I have more to say. Yeah, because we have, yeah. The certification is one way, of course, and there are also other. We are looking at following closely what's happening with carbon finance, how smallholders, if they benefit. And we are collaborating with a project which is famous in Sweden, which is called VI Agroforestry. They were the first ones to receive carbon funds, for example. So we have been supporting them a lot, trying to write about it and see what's happening. And now, after 10 years of this receiving voluntary carbon funds, there are also research. So what happened is that when you apply this kind of methodology, you need to apply if you are supposed to store carbon in your small farm, you will also get better yields. That is what counts, on the ground. And that is really good, because then you are also contributing to reducing climate impact, but you yourself are benefiting. And so those are also very important examples and how we do it. But there are big issues, because how do you measure then this carbon in 70,000 households in Kenya? How will that kind of things happen? But I think it's really critical that there are methods to do it, so that the smallholders can be, because otherwise they will be set aside, and a lot of funding streams will not be there for them. And those are voluntarily, and those are government funds, and those are also, from companies. There is a big interest to offset carbon. So that is also another, I just show you there are different ways, but there are also now coming out from many, what should I say, donors and philanthropies, and they are now also going together, finding, creating a funding basket for what you call agroecological farming. And that hasn't been possible before, or it has maybe been possible, but it's difficult. But because we now have 13 principles for agroecology, they can do that. So there is a funding mechanism for those kind of, and then donors and private and whatever contributes into that funding. I don't have the full insight, but this is something that we will also write about and try to raise and present also in this, when we talk about funding opportunities and what is the requirement, for example. And certification, yes, we dealt with that already in 2017, and those are very difficult also to raise, but I think they are very important because there are other movements, but still certifications are quite solid, and if that could also trickle down funding to farmers and that you can see that would be very good.
Yeah. Take a look at rainforest because that has happened since 2017. So
yeah, I know. We were working a lot with them before, and I will take a look at them again because, as I said, we are preparing something on this in this line. So it's really good that you highlighted that.
All right, Willis, you're up next, and then Emily and Sahar.
Thank you so much, everyone. My name is Willis Ching. I'm the Executive Director of CRITS International, an organization working mostly to transform our lives in agriculture. We work in Kenya. And this is a very good discussion, just thinking about food transformation. And like you said, that food transformation has become something that we talk about a lot, but actualizing it is one of the biggest challenges. And so I wanted to talk about two things. One, what you mentioned that traditional knowledge as one of those things that you focus on. And I really believe on traditional knowledge as one of those critical pillars that we can leverage on to address issues like climate change and food transformation in general. So I'm curious how you really work around that, because a lot of the discussion is actually at high level. We see a lot of that discussion at high level, but it's not trickling down to communities. So that's one question. I don't know whether it comes as a question or not, but yeah, that is one of the questions.
Okay, traditional knowledge, traditional seeds, traditional crops. Yeah, it's something that we have been, what should I say, also indigenous knowledge and food systems is something that we share knowledge about. You know, we are not implementers and we are not, and understanding, and we try to get researchers to present what they're doing, but also SMEs to present products and process they are doing, because it's not only to cultivate a crop, indigenous crop, or some kind of neglected crop, and think that people will start to eat it, because it's so much more. And you have to look at the whole the processing, but also marketing and acceptance, that people go back and eat something that they might connect with a time when it was more difficult or whatever. But definitely there is, so it's talking at high level. What we are doing is that we are, as I said, we try to identify who is doing it, where are the projects, what are the results of those, and there are big, huge projects funded by, for example, SIDA working with Oxfam. We try to lift the results. There are other workings, EU working with Swedish consultancy, looking at these traditional crops, putting them in the value chain and see what you can get out of it. And we try to lift it and make it available and knowledge available for decision-making people. That's what we can do, I think, currently. But we are not only on the traditional one, we also are very interested to see what the biotech and in combination with traditional crops as well. What can it offer? Is it viable? We have a big project looking at biologicals or we have an expert group looking at the potential of biologicals in Eastern Africa as a crop protection, for example. It's also going back partly to traditional knowledge, but also combining it with new tech, which is interesting. So we try to bring up those that based on science, we know can have some benefits, but getting a product, getting some science results doesn't mean that people will accept it. It needs so much more. And that's where the conversation and the dialogue really is fruitful.
Thanks, Madeline. Yeah, there's a lot to pick up there, but we'll go on to the next two questions, and like I said, we we can kind of circle back to any of these points a little bit later. Emily.
Thanks so much, and hello, and thank you for a brilliant event and presentations. I've really enjoyed reading the report beforehand, and the area of work that I'm doing at the moment is I work for the Sustainable Food Trust, which is in the UK, and I work on the Global Farm Metric, GFM, which is an approach and framework to help working with farmers. It's a very farmer-focused project looking at measuring sustainability, sustainable agriculture on farms, so that farmers can look at their own farm system, get a baseline of data that they might be able to use for reporting to themselves for their own viability, vulnerability, so their own sustainability as a farm, but also looking at their contribution to the wider sustainability of the wider world across all of the pillars. So the framework has everything we could think of in it. And so my question is, with that in mind, so the focus of the work is looking at how to measure, monitor sustainability in agriculture. We're not looking at the whole food system at the moment, but the longer term aim is, which is a whole conversation, and sustainable diets, thinking about the SDGs. It's a very farmer focused approach, and one of the things that we're really conscious of, we're doing trials all over the world, some of them internationally focused on small scale farmers. If farmers are being invited to take a transformation to whatever's defined as more sustainable agriculture, what are the support mechanisms, the social protections? For example, the FAO at the Committee on Food Security, their reports require that any interventions or changes that affect farmers, that farmers' livelihoods and food security, that they are supported through social protections for that. And also through this certification or measuring and monitoring and helping fund and support sustainability on farms, how do we ensure fair equity, diversity and inclusion, access to those mechanisms and the assessments, because they can be very complicated, thinking about the MSC fisheries certification, the forestry certification, the gold standard carbon certification. They can be very exclusive for the small scale farmers. So yeah, I'm quite interested at the moment in looking at how we avoid elite capture and exclusion of those that are most marginalized or most vulnerable actually to the changing world and being invited to change. It's a big responsibility. I like that the report talked about the duty bearers. And I think anybody that's asking someone to change is a duty bearer. So yeah, I'm really interested in dialogue around those elements of what we mean by sustainable agriculture and how do we help people access change, but also support them in change. Thanks.
Access. Yeah, sustainable agriculture. I think there are different systems, and you have to look at the system if it's sustainable with different sustainability criteria. There are bigger farms and smaller farms, and you talked about the small farms. What we see now is actually, as I told you before, that I think this kind of agroecology, when they have this criteria, it's easier, and it can help some of these farmers to actually access in at least, or it can help also organizations who wants to support farmers to access funding. That's probably the way it goes, because it's still very difficult for the smallholders, especially if we look at in countries like in developing and low-income countries. In Sweden, we have been also learning with our Swedish farmers and young farmers who are very keen on working in a more sustainable way, producing their food sustainably. Some of them are organic farmers, but unfortunately the government policy for organic is not so favorable any longer right now, but it can always change. I think we are still doing quite good. And young farmers are very interested of working with their land in a sustainable way. I think there are funding mechanisms in a country developed like Sweden through government and agency, but it's not enough. So we know, for example, that cover crops up to now, I think it has changed. It was difficult to get funding for it, for example, if you wanted to do a more, should I say, carbon-friendly agriculture or but this is a process where you need to work with the smallholders, but you really need to work with the duty bearers as well and raise the importance. And SIANI has contributed somehow to look at the carbon in soil in Sweden and why it's important, because it has many multiple impact also if you use it and you can measure it. There is a lot of problem of measuring, but we are interested to understand the measuring, because if we don't understand it in Sweden, it's very difficult to think that we should understand it elsewhere. So we need to know what we are doing, you know, when we want to promote it. Yeah, so I think that there are mechanisms and there are actors in the network that can help out with the access, and there are different sustainability criteria. But I think that the agroecology has a lot to offer actually in that.
Just one point on equitable access to these benefits, these social security protections or otherwise. I wonder if Alice or anyone else on the call has any notions on kind of how do you ensure that. You're right, there's people in quite remote areas, there's language barriers, there's knowledge barriers, there's people that are doing work that the metrics aren't recognizing necessarily because it's outside of the scope, or there's all these different kind of translation, and it's quite, this is a very difficult and important question, but I just wonder, yeah, if anyone else has any other notions on the kind of equitable access to the benefits.
Alice?
I don't have a direct answer, maybe, but just I'm thinking more in general, connecting back to duty bearers and recognizing which actors that are in the middle and that you can actually, in your position or your organization, access in your work. And I think those are important steps as well to map those actors and map which type of access you do have access to as an organizations that might lead further along kind of the chain down to the most vulnerable or most marginalized that should have the access in the end, and that we would like in SIANI that we would like to recognize as well. Those are the groups that are in focus in our work as well. But then again, coming back to the realistic point of what can you do as a network based in Sweden, how can we share learnings, as Madeleine said, of what we are doing in Sweden, for example, to our network, and have more of a working with, more of actors that we can access. But I'm not sure if that answered your question, Matthew. Maybe someone else has like more implementation experience.
I think it comes back to what we were saying earlier, which is that like everyone has kind of unique responsibilities here, and what's in your sort of power that you can do. And I think one of the things that SIANI does really well is approaches like what are the indicators of sustainable farming, and giving some sort of like research backing and legitimacy to that as well. So it's kind of part of a longer equation. So yeah, we've got a question from Zahir, and then we have a few questions from the audience.
Can I just comment on
a quick comment? Yeah.
Yeah, as I said, our expert group calls as, for example, this is how we try to change. At least we have made the calls now in French and Spanish. It's not all languages, but it's somehow. So we have attracted more people, and saying that okay, you can do the expert groups in any language, but you report in English. You have to find someone that can do that. And but also expert groups products in we had someone working wild foods in Southeast Asia. They produced everything in local languages, And also we had television programs in Nepalese on biodiversity and sustainable agriculture and cooking, combining it. And so that is possibly where we don't we share on different languages, but of course a website we can't afford a super exclusive website, so it's produced in English. But if you go a little bit longer, or you go to YouTube, you'll find a lot of material also that we have supported in other languages.
Yeah, really nice. Sahar, please.
So the good thing is now a lot of my points have been addressed really well. But yeah, a light introduction. My name is Sahar. I'm a food systems transformations researcher at the University of Oxford's Environmental Change Institute. What I do is basically map food systems very comprehensively at multiple scales. So what our group tends to do is move beyond looking at just a couple of actors in the system and try to have as big and comprehensive a picture as possible so we can better understand impacts across the system. So if we are doing an intervention with, let's say, one actor group, then what does that mean for other actors and other interlinked groups? But today I'm here with my hat on for IFSTAL, which is the Interdisciplinary Food Systems Teaching and Learning Program. And this is a reflective, learning-focused community of practice of food system thinkers from a very, very wide range of backgrounds. And what the program does is it equips participants with a whole range of skills to apply critical interdisciplinary thinking across food systems. So again, a lot of the language that SIANI and colleagues on the call have used. And the whole point is to engender learning across people's professional lives and, academic lives. But to drive that systems change from within. And one of the questions I had for colleagues on the call, which helpfully has already been talked about with words like funding and financing and like trickling down of effects. And I think a lot of the implicit assumptions are that there needs to be a very big structural transformation in the food system because there are those big power dynamics and issues of equitable access and just equity. And if we are looking and focusing on the marginalized groups and the smaller actors, which we 100% should, because, listening to the losers of activities has to be a focus, otherwise we don't get anywhere. But yeah, like given where you are in the food system, like what do you think is the contribution towards making that structural transformation so it's not just continuing business as usual and it's not just a drop in the pond, as it were, because like duty bearers is an excellent idea, but how much of that gets actioned in a way where we're not just repeating the same mistakes of the past? Because right now, like a lot of success and growth would mean repeating the same vicious cycles, like an SME is successful if it scales up in some way and then becomes part of the problem again. So I know it's like an impossible question, but I wondered if you had any reflections on, especially with SIANI's path forward, because you've learned and changed so much. So yeah, how are you going to transform the system in the way that we need?
We're not going to do that, but we are going to encourage people to take that critical look. And so, but I think Alice can say something about, I think it's important that we really emphasize on the amplification. Maybe Alice, you can say something about that, how we work a little bit on that, on voices. Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with you as well, Sahir, and it really relates to a question we got in the chat as well about like including pathways of breaking down the current systems and disrupting the current system. And our theory of change is not really built in that way, actually, but it's a very interesting approach that to think about. But our theory of change in our program doesn't really define how, like which approach we use, right? So I think those conversations can still take part and be amplified through the network. And also, I think as part of capacity building and inclusive multi-sector dialogue, also, even though that's a quite broad goal in our theory of change, the analysis done before implementing those activities, like who are the duty bearers, how can we find duty bearers that are disruptive, or methodologies for approaches that are not continuing to to produce the same system that we are trying to change could be ways of doing that as a network.
Can I just ask, sorry, Matthew, I know I'm, continuing, but I'm wondering why, there's a bit of risk, because SIANI is a big voice in this area, and, listening to Anna before, a very, very trusted voice. So why not take the theory of change forward a lot more? Because in a lot of ways, you are also a big duty bearer. So maybe the more you do, the more responsibility there is. So I know it's very provocative and it's unfair, but why not? Sorry, I'll stop talking now.
No, but I think I like challenges, but we have challenges in the current theory of change. But of course, we are many times getting revolted when we see things are not moving or going backward. I think we are in a difficult situation where we are seated in Sweden right now also. And so we understand that, but we still have to push. And I like that challenge, but as Alice said, there are some limitations also. We are very small. We need the researchers also to help us. And sometimes we can do that, but yeah, not a good answer, but I accept the challenge.
I think just for the sake of time, I'll leave this part of the official formal part of the recording and just do a sign off. And then if you want, you can stay on and kind of talk a little bit more, because I think there are some other kind of rich questions if you're open to staying on and just talking for another 10 minutes or 15 minutes or so. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you to all of the panelists. Thank you for all the great questions. We can also collect these questions and link to them later too when we post the recording. There's we had one comment that said, duty bearers, this is an interesting word that I'm taking me with out of this conversation. We had some nice thoughts on kind of what are the different responsibilities of the different actors. How do you deal with kind of power in the food system, this kind of lurking thing that exists in the back of theory of change. So yeah, I just will officially wrap here and say thank you everyone for coming, and we'll stop the recording.